Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting into a story that, well, it's really famous, but also fundamentally misunderstood.
Mm,
We're talking about the federal conviction of Christopher Dorsey, who most people know as BG, the legendary rapper, founding figure of the Hot Boys.
yeah, a huge name.
And this isn't just a straightforward legal case. It's become this narrative tangled up in, cultural folklore.
Absolutely. Especially revolving around these really persistent, sometimes vicious rumors about cooperation, who talked, who didn't.
That noise, that's exactly what we need to cut through today.
Right. For more than a decade now, the public talk has mostly focused on this one simple, really inflammatory label, snitch.
But the legal paperwork, the actual documents,
Mhm.
they tell a much more specific story, more nuanced, and ultimately pretty definitive.
So our mission then is simple. We're bypassing the gossip.
Exactly.
We've gone straight to the source, the official court record, United States v. Christopher Dorsey.
We want to understand exactly what the indictment said, what the pleas actually covered, and what the sentencing really dictated.
We're basically separating the cold, hard legal facts from those street labels.
Right. And the key question we really need to answer in this deep dive, it sounds simple, but it's crucial. Did BG cooperate with the government,
Mm-hmm.
to get leniency, or did the documents actually confirm the opposite? Getting the timeline right here is it's vital.
Okay, let's unpack this. We really have to start at the beginning with the incident that kicked the whole thing off.
Yeah.
That 2009 traffic stop in New Orleans.
Yeah.
What were the actual circumstances around that initial arrest?
Well, it was pretty straightforward on the surface.
Yeah.
BG was in a car with two associates, Demounde Pollard and Terry Wilson.
Okay.
During the stop, police found 3 loaded firearms inside the vehicle. Now, because BG was already a convicted felon,
Ah, that's the key part.
that's the kicker. Those guns immediately became a serious federal issue. Felon in possession of a weapon. That charge alone carries potentially severe penalties. So, the first problem was the guns, plus his status as a felon. But the case against him, it really ramped up significantly a couple of years later,
About 2 years later.
when a federal grand jury issued a new indictment. And this is where the whole story shifts, doesn't it? From just having the guns to, actively undermining the investigation.
Precisely. May 2011, that's when a new, much more damaging charge gets added.
Yeah.
Conspiracy to obstruct justice. Okay?
And this wasn't about the original crime anymore, the gun possession itself. It was about the alleged actions BG took after that traffic stop.
And what does conspiracy to obstruct justice actually mean in this specific situation? What do they accuse him of doing?
It means trying to impede, get in the way of a federal investigation. In this specific case, prosecutors alleged that BG and others tried to mislead investigators
Oh.
by encouraging one of his associates, Demounde Pollard, to falsely claim ownership of those 3 loaded firearms.
Ah, okay. So take the fall for him. Essentially, yeah. The goal was clearly to redirect that felony blame away from BG, because as a convicted felon, he was the one facing the absolute harshest potential sentence.
So what's fascinating here is the legal basis for this obstruction charge, it immediately points towards BG trying to hide the truth from law enforcement.
Exactly. Not reveal it.
He was basically trying to engineer a cover-up, legally speaking.
That's a good way to put it. He was attempting to get someone else to lie, to perjure themselves, to save him from those mandatory minimums tied to the felon in possession charge.
Right.
And that action, trying to get someone else to take the fall, that's what formed the basis of the obstruction charge.
Okay, and that brings us straight to Demounde Pollard, because he really is the pivot point for this whole case, isn't he?
He absolutely is. His actions are what ultimately cemented BG's conviction on that count, and also what fueled all the public controversy and confusion.
So what happened with Pollard?
Well, initially, Pollard did exactly what BG allegedly asked him to do. He told the local police, yeah, those guns, they're mine.
Okay, so the cover-up was working at first?
For a time, yeah. That was the attempted cover-up in action. But then when the federal indictment came down, and Pollard himself was looking at serious time.
The pressure changed things.
It seems so. Pollard changed his story.
What did he do that, unraveled the whole obstruction attempt?
It was a pretty dramatic shift. Pollard later testified, under oath, in federal court, that his initial statement to the police was false.
Wow.
And the pivotal moment, the real linchpin, was when he admitted that BG had specifically asked him to lie and claim ownership of those firearms.
Okay, let me make sure I understand this sequence because it's critical. BG tries to get his associate, Pollard, to lie to protect him.
Correct.
And then that same associate, Pollard, later cooperates with the government.
Yes.
by testifying about BG's attempt to obstruct justice in the first place.
That is the absolute critical distinction here.
Yeah.
BG was charged with obstruction because he tried to misdirect blame, get someone else to lie. Pollard's testimony, on the other hand, that was a clear act of cooperation with the government. He provided the definitive evidence they needed to convict BG on that obstruction count.
So if we connect this back to the bigger picture, the whole street narrative, the rumor mill about who cooperated, it's basically upside down compared to the legal record.
Completely inverted, yeah.
Yeah.
The common wisdom, which you hear often, is that BG somehow cooperated or, blamed his friend.
Right.
But
He snitched on his boy.
But the documentation, the court records, they show Pollard cooperated against BG.
So where does the controversy come from then? Why the mix-up?
Well, it seems to stem from confusing BG's attempt to shift blame onto Pollard.
His obstruction.
His obstruction, exactly.
Yeah.
Confusing that with the idea that BG himself gave information to the government. They're just two totally different legal actions.
With opposite intentions and consequences.
Completely opposite. BG's action, the obstruction attempt, actually increased his potential sentence. Pollard's cooperation, testifying against BG, helped solidify BG's conviction and sentence.
Okay, but the rumor that BG himself snitched, it's still out there, it persists. So we need to look at BG's own actions in court, because that really provides the final definitive proof against that claim.
This is where the court docket just lays it all out with absolute clarity. December 7th, 2011, Christopher Dorsey pleads guilty.
To everything, to all three counts. The 2 gun charges and the conspiracy to obstruct charge. And here is the single most defining legal detail, the one that really matters for this whole debate. Okay?
This plea was entered without a written plea agreement.
Let's just pause on that for a second. The absence of a written plea agreement. Why is that so significant? What does that tell a court observer?
It tells you there was no deal. Simple as that. If a defendant cooperates with the government in a meaningful way, provides substantial assistance, gives information, testifies against others, leads to arrests.
Something that helps the prosecution significantly.
Exactly. If they do that, there is always a formal written plea agreement filed publicly. Details that exchange.
Yeah.
Cooperation for potential leniency. And in BG's case, the court records contain zero evidence of any such formal cooperation deal. Nothing. BG admitted guilt to the crimes he was charged with. Full stop. No documented quid pro quo.
And the sentencing itself seems to back this up perfectly. I mean, if BG had cooperated, wouldn't the government typically file something asking the judge for a lighter sentence?
Absolutely. It's called a 5K1.1 motion. The prosecution recommends a downward departure from the sentencing guidelines based on substantial assistance.
And that did not happen here. It did not happen. July 18, 2012, BG gets his sentence. 168 months in federal prison. That's 14 years.
14 years. Plus 3 years of supervised release afterwards. That length of sentence, 14 years, it's substantial. It strongly suggests zero extraordinary concessions were made for cooperation.
Because if he had provided really meaningful help,
We'd typically expect to see that 14-year sentence potentially cut dramatically, maybe by half, sometimes even more, depending on the value of the cooperation. The fact he received and ultimately served such a long term really confirms the absence of that kind of assistance.
and even later court filings, they seem to show the continuity of that original sentence, don't they? Like, there was that motion for compassionate release later on.
Yeah, in 2021, the court denied his motion for compassionate release. The order and reasons document confirms he was serving time consistent with the original terms. There weren't any hidden side deals or sentence reductions reflecting prior assistance mentioned.
So the paper trail is just really consistent. The documents consistently point to the same conclusion. BG did not cut a deal with the government in exchange for information. His decision to plead guilty, well, it was likely pragmatic, right? Avoid the risk and uncertainty of a trial. Makes sense.
But it wasn't a bargain struck based on him providing information against others.
Okay, so when we boil all this down for, critical thinking, for understanding what actually happened, we're left with a pretty clear sequence of evidence that just flatly contradicts the rumor that's been floating around for years.
Absolutely. We can really simplify this into maybe two main points for you to remember. First, BG pleaded guilty to 3 serious felonies, including obstruction of justice, without any formal cooperation agreement on file.
He wasn't the snitch. He wasn't the snitch, according to the legal record. Point 2. His associate, Demounde Pollard, did cooperate.
Right.
Pollard testified that BG was the one who asked him to lie about owning the guns.
So the obstruction charge itself, the reason he got extra time wasn't because BG gave information.
No.
It was the penalty BG faced for trying to stop the truth from coming out, for trying to mislead the investigation.
That's really the core takeaway here. This story at its heart isn't about government collaboration by BG. It's about the high cost of, well, attempted disloyalty and how legal risks can compound.
BG was already facing serious time just for the gun charge itself. But the extra years added because of that obstruction charge, the attempt to get his friend to lie for him, that's what truly defined the severity of his final sentence.
And the confusion just comes from that mismatch in language, right? The street term snitch gets applied so broadly.
So broadly, to almost anyone involved in a situation where someone else gets in trouble. But in the legal record, the only documented cooperation offered was by Pollard, and it was against BG.
It's a really powerful lesson, isn't it, about how a specific legal term, conspiracy to obstruct justice, can get completely, hijacked and twisted by a general street label.
It really is. The paperwork confirms Pollard gave statements against BG, which helped seal the conviction. Meanwhile, BG's own court docket shows no deal was ever made for him.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, following this story?
Well, we took this complex, really emotional, rumor-filled narrative that's been part of the culture for so long.
And just by focusing purely on the official court documents, the docket, we found that the actual cooperation that sealed the conviction came from an associate, not from BG himself.
Context is just everything.
It really is, especially when you're looking at these high-profile, often confusing legal controversies.
It is. And maybe here's the final thought, something provocative for you to consider as we wrap up.
Okay.
The legal record really confirms that the severe consequences BG faced, that full 14-year sentence, were directly made worse by his own calculated attempt to, well, destroy evidence and mislead investigators. That action, trying to get Pollard to lie, it didn't just bring on the obstruction charge itself.
It had knock-on effects.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It seems to have set off this chain reaction where his own associate then chose to testify against him. So that dynamic of loyalty and betrayal among friends, triggered by BG's own attempt at a cover-up, that's what ultimately defined his long sentence, much more than any rumors about him cooperating ever could.